What's up, everybody? It's Mr. Pratt here, and this is Hopscotch.
Yeah, we are laying the place to be.
So as you know, I'm always bringing you accessible, modifiable, and engaging content for in the gym, in the classroom, and at home. Today's game, Hopscotch, is a classic tarmac game played in schools all across North America. Hopscotch is a simple setup, requires minimal equipment, and is a great one for working on balance, agility, and fundamental movement skills like hopping and jumping. Now, many schools already have a Hopscotch grid painted on their tarmac, but if you don't have that luxury, it's easy to make this game, as you'll see in the video to come. Just like my other tarmac games, this is a great one for teaching kids to play on their own time at recess, that they'll have fun and be able to do without adult supervision. So if you haven't checked out my videos on Foursquare and wall ball, be sure to do that after you check out this video. So now that you got a little bit of background on Hopscotch, let's check out the setup. So as I said, many school tarmacs already have Hopscotch set up for you. The basic idea of Hopscotch is it's a series of boxes, each with a number in them. This is an example of a classic Hopscotch grid. It's numbered 1 through 9 with 9 separate boxes. These designs can vary based on school and personal preference, but we'll check that out more in Pratt's Playbook at the end of this video. Now, one thing you might notice is lacking is the number 10 on our grid. A lot of classic Hopscotch grids have a half circle at the top above the 9 with the number 10. And that's used as what's called a rest area, where players can turn around before they come back through the Hopscotch grid. We don't have that number 10. It could be easily added. I just use the asphalt at the end as the turnaround point. Aside from that, your setup's already done for you. All you're going to need is a marker. In this case, I've chosen a beanbag, but all you really need is a stick, a pebble, a rock, and you're good to go. So let's check out how to play classic Hopscotch now. All right, so we're ready to play some Hopscotch. Hopscotch can be played individually and also in small groups. In theory, it could be played with large groups as well, but that's going to have way too many people waiting, so I prefer to keep it to groups of 2 or 3 to keep everybody moving and engaged. In the classic version of Hopscotch, when it's my turn, I'm going to take the marker and I'm going to throw it onto number 1. Okay? If I miss, or my marker goes on a different number, in traditional Hopscotch, you would normally lose your turn, but as you know, I don't like promoting games that you have to sit out of on my channel. So instead of having students sit out, simply have them try and throw it again, or if they miss their target, simply go and grab their marker and put it on the number 1 so they don't lose their chance to play the game. So if it's my turn, as I said, I'm going to try and get this marker onto square number 1. If I'm successful in doing that, I'm going to try and proceed through the Hopscotch grid, get to the end, turn around, come back, pick up my marker, all without losing my balance, stepping on a line, or falling out of the grid. It would look something like this. Alright, so I'm done number 1. As you saw, as I move through the grid, as I'm moving through single boxes, I can choose to be on my right or my left foot. It's my choice. When I hit a double box, I have to utilize both feet. Now, if I'm done number 1 on my next turn, after I've let the other participants have their first turn, I'm going to aim for box number 2. If I'm able to get my marker on box number 2, I would move through the grid again and pick up the marker on the way back as follows. Now you notice that, of course, I always skip the square with the marker on it. That is part of traditional Hopscotch. And when the marker happens to be on one of your doubles boxes, like number 4 and 5, you simply have to do a single foot hop when you pass your marker again. It would look like follows. the game's going to continue in this pattern until one player is able to get their marker all the way to box number 9 and successfully complete the grid. Once they've done this, they're considered the winner, and you restart the game. All right, everybody, so that about does it for Hopscotch. As I said, this is a very simple game, but that doesn't mean it's not an effective and fun one. It's great for working on that balance, those fundamental movement skills that are precursors to more complex activities. In addition, it's easy to set up, doesn't require adult supervision, and can be done inside, outside, at home, and at school. If you enjoyed this video and you want some more ideas for tarmac games that can be played at recess without adult supervision, be sure to check out my videos on Foursquare and wall ball. And of course, be sure to stick around for Pratt's Playbook on the back half of this video to hear more modifications and different variations on the equipment and setup. Thanks again for watching. If you enjoyed my video, please remember to hit that subscribe button down there, sign up for notifications, like and share away. I always love hearing your comments as well. But for now, this is Mr. Pratt signing off from Hopscotch.
And now it's time for Pratt's Playbook, a unique perspective from Mr. Pratt on modifications, additional gameplay considerations, and more.
All right, everyone, so now we've checked out traditional Hopscotch. Let's talk about a few things from Pratt's perspective. So for your setup, one of the basic variations of Hopscotch would be changing the design of your grid. As I said on the top of the video, if you add in that 10 half circle above the 9, it's a great way to add a visual rest area where students don't feel like they're falling out of the grid or breaking the rules of the game. I've seen many different designs of the Hopscotch grid. The simplest variation is by changing where your doubles are. So you could have 1 and 2 at the start side by side, and you could have 3 and 4 be singles, 5 and 6 as doubles, you name it. It could be primarily doubles, and if only a few singles, again, depending on what you want to do, how creative you want to be, and probably what age you're working with. Obviously, the single leg jumps and hops are going to be much harder for younger audiences and less skilled participants. Another modification I've seen with the equipment is actually leaving something called dead zones. So say, for example, between box number 2 and 3, there's an empty square or a grayed out square that students always have to skip. This, of course, adds a new level of challenge because they're going to have to be skipping the box with their marker on it, as well as those dead zone boxes that you've put on your grid. So if you want some more complexity, that's a good option for you as well. Some other variations to consider are much more complex. I've seen people make Hopscotch into a circle. So it's the same box format, but instead of putting in a linear path, they go in a circular path. So 10 would be in the middle, and then 9's on the outside, 8 goes around, 7 goes around, kind of like how the planets orbit around the sun. Other considerations would be changing the size and shape of your grid. So you could have some big squares, big rectangles, small rectangles. You could even use triangles to make it a little bit more difficult. Just keep in mind the size of your player's feet and their abilities and how challenging you want it to be. Now, as I mentioned in the video, you only need one marker to successfully play Hopscotch, even in a group. You just have to share it. But if you want players to have their own unique marker, of course, feel free to give them that. There'll probably be less wait time, and there's also less equipment sharing if you're worried about that. When considering your markers, you can also consider changing up the delivery style. If you're having them work on two-hand underhand throws, one-hand overhand throws, having them practice those skills while they're also playing Hopscotch, it's 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, if you're wanting to switch things up even further, consider trying these different modifications to the actual gameplay. Number 1, you can play Sign the Name. In Sign the Name, students are able to throw their marker onto any of the 9 boxes right off the hop. They don't have to start with number 1 and go in a sequential order. When they throw the marker and they land on a number, if they're able to successfully move through the grid and back, all they're going to do is using chalk is sign their initials on number 4 to indicate that they've completed number 4. On their next turn, they're going to try and complete a different number. Once they're done all 9 numbers, they would be considered the winner. In this way, participants can move through the grid in whatever way they want, and it also makes it so when students are throwing their marker, they have a little bit more margin for error if they don't hit exactly the number that they're supposed to when we're going in ascending order. Personally, I like this variation best as it allows for a little bit more creativity and less linear thinking, and it makes the groups seem to enjoy the game and be a bit more engaged. Another modification to consider is getting cross-curricular. Sometimes when I have students going through their hopscotch grid, I have them yell out a multiple of the number that they're currently standing on. So when they jump on 1, obviously they could say any number. As they hop onto 2, they could say 4, 6, 8. As they hop onto 3, they could say 6 or 9. You get the idea. Just adding in a little bit of mathematics and cross-curricular learning is a fun way to spice this up and maybe get some movement embedded into skip counting and math class instead of just leaving it for phys ed or recess. And another consideration for cross-curricular modifications would be to change the number system entirely. You could add in letters or categories instead of numbers, and if, say, number 1 changed to an A, when a student jumps on the A, you have to name a word that starts with the letter A. This would work on those literacy skills. 2 could be B, 3 could be C, etc., or whatever letters you happen to be working on. Another way to consider this would be to do categories. Let's say you're working on animal classifications. Number 1 could be mammals, number 2 could be reptiles, and as students move through the grid, they have to name an animal that fits into that category. Of course, with this modification, the options are endless as to what categories you want to choose, and you could use this for multiple different subject areas. Variations for gameplay really are endless. I've also had students play where when they pass a marker, they have to start moving backwards through the grid. So as they hop over the 3, they would have to turn and go backwards on the 4 and 5, finish the grid backwards, come back through the grid forwards, and again, as they pick up their marker and skip over the 3, they would have to turn and finish the grid backwards on the way back as well. There's lots of different variations like this, and a great way to get students involved is to have them create their own modifications and share it with their classmates as well. So when you're playing hopscotch, make sure your hopscotch grid is nice and clear of obstructions, and if you're playing inside, make sure you're using tape that's not going to ruin the finish on your floors. You want to make sure students are confident in balancing on 1 foot, so practicing that balancing prior to playing is a really good idea, as well as hopping and jumping. Warming up ankles and knees and that kind of things with some dynamic movement before playing is of course a great idea as well.